accident or by design, we're all responsible for the situation, and we've only one option: to ensure that ours will be the last generation that allows shame and stigma to rule over science and reason. I think that for me, and why I like the human rights approach, is that there's so much structural inequity built into the system. Systems haven't really been thinking about the needs of people who have mental health problems. And while they don't necessarily intend to be discriminatory, the effect of their policies and their actions are. And so they don't meet the needs of people with mental health issues.
There's a limit to understanding, and there is a limit to the faith we have in each other. When one of our members talks about how embarrassed she was to go to the toilet in front of the CCTV cameras in a police cell because she had been lifted because she was suicidal, then that limit is reached. When a man is imprisoned because he set fire to himself and the NHS would not provide the background reports about his mental health, that limit is also reached. When we watch the Twitter feed of a woman discharged from hospital against her will, taken back to hospital by the police from the bridge she was about to jump off, discharged again, to the point where that very day she drove into a tree and died, that limit is reached. There are limits to our patience and our understanding everywhere. The use of police cells when we're in crisis, the lack of hospital beds or a safe place to go when we're suicidal, the appalling fear people have each time their benefits come up for review, the huge number of people with mental health problems in prison, the high suicide rate of transgender people, the absence of meaningful local services for many young people, and the despair older people feel when they find people do not care anymore for them and write them off in so many hideous ways, and the terrible, terrible isolation so many people experience.
I think bringing organisations together is really important, but actually I think having a human rights focus on mental health is really important. We tend to talk about mental health as an issue that is separate from everything else, whereas in actual fact a lot of the rights issues that we talk about are fundamentally important to how we address some of the issues faced by people. Access to services, the right to life, the right to adequate standards of healthcare, the right to employment. These are all fundamental, important rights.
Audience members had done a study of suicide reporting in newspapers, and there are very good guidelines here in Scotland. We endorsed as a Royal College the Samaritans guidelines. We relaunched them here in Glasgow in 1998, but less than 10% of newspaper stories in the Scottish press right now, according to her study, were adhering to the guidelines of putting in a contact number for if you're in distress with suicidal thoughts, or playing down the role of method in that suicide. So that's the bad stuff, and we can improve on that. The good stuff is when one of the audience members went to talk to Asda about a stigmatising Halloween costume, Asda didn't just quit selling the costume, they then hosted them for a regular seminar with their staff. Other people are going in and talking to the cops, bringing a play to the airports authority, doing really innovative things to use the arts to change the messages.
In the discussion as such around self-stigma, which was, that I recognise Ron Coleman had given a quote that you are not the problem is the problem, and to me that's like kind of, I suppose, understanding self-stigma is I've never really understood what that meant to myself, but that phrase kind of humanised it as such, you're not the problem is the problem, and so that I recognise that now. I kind of realise that I've walked around most of my life thinking I'm the problem rather than the problem being the problem, so that's really helped me.
It's a big issue right now. It's obviously very timely at a point in our government discussing this, issue with abolishing the Human Rights Act. So when I think about my own legislation that I work closely with, self-direct support, that's so closely to the human rights legislation that it's important that we put that right here on the map now, and we're having these discussions now, and what that means for people with mental health issues accessing services.
And I think it's about the fact that linked to the recovery part about what it is that keeps you well as opposed to what it is that someone else says keep you well.
Absolutely. And that's the feeling that I get from here, is a very optimistic, hopeful feeling that people are not looking to for local government to spend money to keep them well. People are genuinely looking at their own self-management opportunities, and the more we come together, this multi-agency approach to collaborate, to share that, to share the wealth of knowledge, then the more people accessing services can make different choices.
Activism comes in many forms. Secondly, there's a way in which people having voice is a start and a big process, but it's not enough. There's all sorts of problems in terms of terminology. People, quite a lot of people don't like the term service users. They find that limiting and a bureaucratising word. And there's an acknowledgement that change has happened in lots of ways here in Scotland and around the world, change that we are still going through and can learn from.
Well, I think human rights is absolutely critical to improving the lives of people with mental health problems, because in the past, their voices haven't been heard, their views haven't necessarily been taken into account in the way that they should do. And I think that observing and respecting and extending human rights is what we ought to be all about.
If I should recall